first panel then. So on our first panel, which is really looking at the frameworks for neighbourhood governance, both sort of the law and practice, we have Claire Ward. So Claire is a partner at Anthony Collins Solicitors, and she has been a local government lawyer for quite a while. I won't say how long because that would be rude. But she does a lot of work around constitutional reviews, governance arrangements and decision making in local authorities. So she's got lots of legal expertise and practice. And then she's joined by Fiona. So Councillor Fiona Barrows, who is the leader and chair of Frome Town Council. And if you haven't come across Frome Town Council, they are very interesting. They've been very interesting for a number of years. So I'm delighted to have them both join us. And I'm going to hand over to Claire first.
Thank you, Mel. I should say as well, before Anthony Collins, I was a monitoring officer, so 20 years local government before joining Anthony Collins 3 years ago. So good morning. And I'm here to provide the legal overview of the neighbourhood governance that's being proposed in the bill. I'm quite happy to not have to do that whole mouthful. Mel, even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not going to actually give you all the statutory references today. And we're going to have a particular focus on what might be mandated, what will be flexible, and then where we're just not quite clear yet. So let's go straight to the basics. What does the bill say? So there is a statutory duty. It does use the words must make. So it's a statutory duty. So I'm excited about that because it means that it's not, I think it was the wildflower, Sarah. It's not the, uniqueness that it's in a particular place that this can flourish. Actually, everyone's got to start thinking about it and talking about it. So I think that's a positive that it is a statutory duty. Designated for neighbourhood areas. So we've got to determine what an area is and that they must be effective. I mean, I've not seen that sort of language in legislation about governance very often. So there are some words there, although there is only half a page really in the bill about this. There are some words that are definitely, levers for doing things exciting. So I did on the poll say this is an opportunity, definitely. But the bill sets the direction. Guess what? There's no detail behind it. That's going to be in future regulations. So we have, as of yet, got no prescribed model. There was an engagement survey that has now closed. It was only open for 3 weeks, which is a little bit curious. And my worry about that is that they were looking for good practice. Now, of course, when they're looking at good practice, that means that they're looking at the existing model. What is the existing model of neighbourhood governance? So I think it was disappointing that they've just looked at that. I think it was a missed opportunity. They could have said, what would you like, rather than what's working well. So what have we got at the moment? If it is going to just use the current legal framework, then what we're looking at is informal arrangements. So things that are in addition to the legal framework with no decision-making powers, but that's where the creative space has been. Or we're looking at formal decision-making powers, exec or non-exec, or a mixture of both, in what's called area committees, which I'm sure you've all got experience of. So that's either under the Local Government Act 2000 or under the 1972 Act, and it is an ordinary committee. And I use the word ordinary because it's a bit boring, I would say, an area committee. It's not dynamic. It will depend on the functions. It's very controlled. They're implementing policies approved by full council. Obviously, got a budget approved by full council, and cabinet are really still in control of how that is being operated. The issues are still about political proportionality, co-option, voting rights, and I just feel that it's still very controlled and rigid. But if anyone's got an area committee that is more dynamic, I'd love to hear about that. So what I think is that the regulations will be of interest when we see a draft, and it sets out in the bill what that is going to cover. Well, it says could, so it doesn't say must, it says could cover, which will be things like what will the governance model look like, so ranging from perhaps a formal committee to perhaps a consultative forum, citizens assembly type approaches, how we've been able to, as I say, use informal arrangements to support neighbourhood governance across the piece. The scope of the powers of that neighbourhood body, whether they will be advisory or whether they'll be decision making. And then the membership rules, who is actually going to be on that body? Is it just going to be councillors? Will it be politically proportionate? And what will the rules look like? So how actually will we enable local engagement? Will there be questions allowed? Will there be deputations? Will there be, how are we going to open the doors and let people in? You know, that's what I really want to see. So there is the potential in those regulations, but at the moment, I feel with the survey that's gone out, it's still quite limited in what they're looking at. So there are some legal uncertainties. It will be about the extent of these powers, whether they will be decision making or advisory. Will they have binding authority? You know, will they have that authority to make decisions? Will they, in that creative space, be able to make recommendations? So even if they're only advisory, you know, there's no harm in saying, but they can recommend things. They can recommend things that have to go on the agenda and they have to be debated. You know, there are things you can do even in the governance structures we've got at the moment that can push this agenda. Political balance. So, you know, area committees have to be politically proportionate. There are some awful regulations under the 2000 Act relating to the size of the committee. It would be lovely to get rid of that, wouldn't it? And say if an area committee is for a place, then those councillors that represent that place are on it, and we can forget about political proportionality. We'll wait to see whether that's a possibility or not. Overlap with parish councils. You know, Fiona's going to talk in a moment about that, but how will the new structures interact with existing town and parish councils? At the moment, it can feel very distant, or it can feel quite close, depending on, again, those informal approaches that have been taken. Certainly at my last authority, we took cabinet out to the areas. That's probably the closest we got, but they were the fullest halls I've ever seen. When we were in the centre, we might have had 1 to 5 people. In the parish and town halls, when we sat and had cabinet there, we were full. Community accountability, then, that's another grey area. What will the regulations mandate? Will they give genuine power sharing? And how does that work with the democratic process in relation to being elected? That's always a space that I'm not quite sure about. We can be creative, but people have been elected to these roles. And then how is trust built, and how is that new relationship created? So I think, given the anticipated size of these new unitary councils, there's going to be multiple area committees as well. And what I'm worried about is that for it to be an effective, think about that word in the regulations, an effective part of governance, it can't just be an add-on, a nice to have. Okay, it's got to be an integral part, and that means looking at your constitution, not just at the area committee end, but actually from your full council all the way down, so that you've got neighbourhood governance as part of your systems. So what does it mean for councils? Well, to begin with, we've got to map what the areas are. We've got to think about what those physical boundaries will be for an area committee, and whether that place is the right place. You know, I mean, there's lots of discussions about that at a unitary level at the moment, let alone on that more localised. Then we'll wait to see whether it's going to be a formal committee or whether we're going to be using informal forums, and whether there will be more creativity. And then I think it's really important we think about how we engage with communities so that we avoid doing it to doing neighbourhood governance to a community, which obviously is not ideal. So I think it is a technical exercise in relation to democratic services and what we need to service and everything else, but it is a cultural shift potentially. It is a cultural shift to change how councils relate to their communities. So I think my final thoughts are, this is a significant opportunity to engage in a different way. It's mandated. We've got to think about it. It's not just a nice to have. How it will rebalance power, let's wait and see, you know, but there is the opportunity, but it will depend on councils being flexible and transparent. And my worry, if I'm honest, is that the regulations will just repackage what we've already got and it won't deliver meaningful change. But I think we've always had the informal arrangements that, okay, you might say, Claire, but you said don't do an add-on, but the informal arrangements are the way that you can be creative, and you've just got to make sure that as a jigsaw piece, they fit within the formal governance decision making. So that's what I've got to say, Mel, on the law so far.
Lovely, thank you, Claire. Reassuring and unreassuring that there was no new news in that. Don't know how I feel about that. We're all kind of waiting, aren't we? And there's a bit of a vacuum. But I think the point that you just said around, you know, being mandated, we've got to think about it. So now is the time to think, you know, within your local authorities and places, explore, think with councillors, officers and councillors working in